Picture this. You're standing in ancient Israel, around 722 BC. The ground shakes. Warriors flood the streets. And in one devastating moment, 10 entire tribes of people, millions of souls, simply vanish from history. Gone. Like they never existed. But here's the thing that'll blow your mind. They didn't just disappear into thin air. They went somewhere. They became someone. And some of them might be people you know today. I'm about to take you on a journey that archaeologists, historians, and even governments have tried to keep quiet. We're talking about the greatest missing persons case in human history. The lost tribes of Israel. And trust me, what you're about to discover will change everything you thought you knew about ancient history. So buckle up, because we're diving deep into secrets that have been buried for almost 3,000 years. Let's start at the beginning, and I promise to keep this simple. Imagine ancient Israel like a big family with 12 brothers. Each brother had his own piece of land, his own people, his own story. These were the 12 tribes of Israel. Now, picture this family getting into a huge fight. So huge that it split them right down the middle. 10 brothers went north and formed what we call the Northern Kingdom of Israel. 2 brothers stayed south and became the Southern Kingdom of Judah. The northern guys? They were doing pretty well for themselves. They had fertile land, good trade routes, and strong cities. But they also had enemies. Big, scary enemies with a particular talent for making people disappear. Enter the Assyrians. These weren't your average ancient warriors. They were the ultimate war machine of their time. Think of them as the most efficient relocators in history, except they didn't just move your furniture. They moved entire civilizations. In 722 BC, the Assyrian king Sargon II decided he'd had enough of the northern kingdom. His army swept through Israel like a tsunami. City after city fell. The capital, Samaria, held out for 3 years, but eventually, even they couldn't resist. But here's where it gets really interesting. The Assyrians had a special strategy. They didn't just conquer. They relocated. They would take the smartest, strongest, and most skilled people from conquered lands and scatter them across their massive empire. It was like the ultimate witness protection program. Except nobody chose to be in it. The Assyrians took the cream of the crop from those 10 northern tribes. We're talking about hundreds of thousands of people. And marched them off to distant lands. Some went to what's now Iraq. Others ended up in Iran. Some were sent to places so remote that even the Assyrians probably forgot where they put them. And just like that, 10 entire tribes of Israel walked into history books and never walked out. No forwarding address. No social media updates. No way to track them down. The remaining 2 tribes in the south? They watched their northern brothers disappear and probably thought, well, that's the last we'll see of them. And for almost 3,000 years they were right. But here's the million-dollar question that's been haunting historians ever since. What happened to those people? Did they just blend into their new communities and forget who they were? Did they maintain their identity in secret? Or did something else entirely happen? The official story is that they assimilated. They became Assyrians, Babylonians, Persians, whatever their new neighbors were. Case closed. Mystery solved. Move along. Nothing to see here. But what if I told you that's not the whole story? What if those tribes didn't just disappear? What if they went underground, maintained their traditions in secret, and started one of the most incredible journeys in human history? What if everything we've been told about the lost tribes is just the tip of the iceberg? Drop a comment below if you think ancient peoples could really just vanish without a trace, or if you believe there's more to this story than we've been told. Alright, so we've established that 10 tribes got scattered to the winds. But here's where the story gets absolutely wild. And I mean Indiana Jones level wild. See, the Assyrians might have thought they were just moving people around like chess pieces. But they accidentally triggered something that would reshape the entire world. They started the greatest migration in human history. Let me paint you a picture. You're a member of the tribe of Dan, let's say. One day you're living peacefully in northern Israel. The next day you're being marched off to some remote corner of the Assyrian Empire. Your entire world has been turned upside down. But here's the thing about the Israelites. They were survivors. They'd been through slavery in Egypt, 40 years wandering in the desert, and countless battles. Being scattered by the Assyrians? That was just Tuesday for them. So what did they do? They adapted. They learned new languages, new customs, new ways of surviving. But, and this is crucial, they didn't forget who they were. They kept their stories alive. They passed down their traditions in secret. They maintained their identity like a hidden flame. And then, something incredible happened. Over the centuries, these scattered tribes started moving again. Not because anyone was forcing them this time, but because something deep inside them was calling them to keep searching. Some historians think they were looking for each other. Others believe they were searching for a new promised land. The evidence for this is mind-blowing. In remote corners of the world, archaeologists have found traces of Hebrew-like languages, ancient Jewish customs, and symbols that shouldn't exist in those places. We're talking about locations thousands of miles from Israel, in regions that supposedly never had contact with Jewish people. Take the Pashtun people of Afghanistan and Pakistan. They have oral traditions that explicitly claim descent from the lost tribes. They have customs that mirror ancient Jewish practices. They even have tribal names that sound suspiciously like the original Hebrew names of the lost tribes. Or consider the Lemba people of southern Africa. For generations, they've maintained that they came from a place called Senna in the north. They practice circumcision, keep dietary laws similar to kosher rules, and have oral traditions about a great temple that was destroyed. DNA testing has revealed that many Lemba men carry genetic markers typically found in Jewish populations. But it gets even more interesting. Some researchers believe that groups from the lost tribes didn't just migrate south or stay put in the Middle East. They think some headed north. Way north. Through the Caucasus Mountains into what's now Russia, and from there. Well, from there the world was their oyster. There's a theory that's been quietly circulating among historians for decades. It suggests that some of the lost tribes made it all the way to Europe. That they settled in various countries, maintained their distinct identity for a while, and then gradually blended into the local populations. This isn't just wild speculation. There are medieval documents that reference Jewish communities in places where official history says there shouldn't have been any. There are linguistic clues, words and phrases that seem to have Hebrew origins showing up in languages that shouldn't have them. And then there's the really controversial stuff. Some researchers believe that certain European populations might have significant genetic and cultural connections to the lost tribes. They point to customs, folklore, and even physical characteristics that seem to echo ancient Israelite traditions. But here's where it gets really crazy. What if the migration didn't stop in Europe? What if some of these groups kept moving? What if they crossed oceans, discovered new continents, and established themselves in places that wouldn't be officially discovered for centuries? There are Native American tribes with flood stories that match the biblical account. There are ancient structures in the Americas that seem to have Middle Eastern architectural influences. There are linguistic similarities between certain Native American languages and Hebrew that make linguists scratch their heads. I know this sounds like something out of a conspiracy theory, but remember, we're talking about people who survived the destruction of their homeland, maintained their identity through forced relocation, and had the skills and determination to travel thousands of miles in an era when most people never left their villages. The question isn't whether they could have done it. The question is, did they? And if they did, what does that mean for everything we think we know about ancient history? Let me know in the comments what you think. Could ancient peoples really have traveled such incredible distances? Or are these just coincidences that we're reading too much into? Now we're getting to the really mind-bending part. Because it turns out that the lost tribes didn't just disappear, they left breadcrumbs. Lots of them. And these breadcrumbs are scattered across the globe in ways that'll make your head spin. Let's start with something that blew researchers' minds when they first discovered it. In the mountains of Ethiopia, there's a community called the Beta Israel, also known as Ethiopian Jews. For centuries, they practiced Judaism in complete isolation from the rest of the Jewish world. They had their own version of Hebrew, their own religious practices, and their own oral traditions. But here's the kicker. They claimed to be descendants of the tribe of Dan. And when genetic testing became available, guess what? They showed clear genetic links to Middle Eastern Jewish populations. The Ethiopian government eventually recognized them as genuine Jews, and many were airlifted to Israel in dramatic rescue operations. But Ethiopia is just the beginning. In India, there are multiple communities that claim descent from the lost tribes. The Bene Israel community has been in India for over 2,000 years. They have traditions that speak of arriving after a shipwreck, carrying with them the knowledge of Jewish practices. The Bnei Minashi people in northeastern India have oral traditions that trace their origins back to the tribe of Manasseh. What's fascinating is that these communities developed their Jewish practices independently. They weren't in contact with mainstream Judaism, Yet they maintained customs that are remarkably similar to ancient Jewish traditions. And then there's the Cochin Jews of Kerala, India. They have copper plates that supposedly date back to the 4th century, granting them privileges in the region. Their synagogue is one of the oldest in the world. How did they get there? Their traditions speak of arriving from Israel after the destruction of the Second Temple, but some researchers think their roots go back much further. But it's not just about isolated communities. There are traces of the lost tribes woven into the very fabric of world religions and cultures. Buddhism, for example, has several concepts that seem to echo ancient Israelite beliefs. The idea of a chosen people, specific dietary laws, and even some meditation practices have parallels to Jewish traditions. Some researchers have proposed that when the lost tribes were scattered, they didn't just passively assimilate. They actively influenced the cultures they encountered. They brought their knowledge, their beliefs, and their practices, and these elements got absorbed into local traditions. This might explain why flood stories appear in cultures all over the world. Why concepts of monotheism show up in places that supposedly never had contact with Judaism. Why certain symbols and practices that originated in ancient Israel can be found in the most unlikely places. Let's talk about the really controversial stuff. There are researchers who believe that the lost tribes made it to the Americas long before Columbus. They point to ancient structures that seem to have Middle Eastern architectural influences. They highlight linguistic similarities between Hebrew and certain Native American languages. The Bat Creek inscription, found in Tennessee, contained what some experts believe are Hebrew letters. There are stone structures in New England that some researchers think show ancient Middle Eastern construction techniques. There are Native American traditions that speak of light-skinned visitors who brought knowledge of agriculture and metallurgy. Now, I'm not saying this is definitely true. But it's interesting that these theories keep popping up in different places around the world. It's like pieces of a massive puzzle that we're only beginning to understand. And here's something that'll really bake your noodle. DNA technology has revealed that many populations around the world have genetic markers that suggest Middle Eastern ancestry. Not just the communities that claim to be Jewish, but groups that have no traditions of Jewish heritage at all. Some of these populations are in Central Asia, some in Africa, some in Europe. The genetic signatures are subtle, but they're there. It's as if the lost tribes scattered so widely and mixed so thoroughly with local populations that their genetic footprint got diluted but never completely disappeared. This raises an incredible possibility. What if the lost tribes didn't just influence ancient cultures? What if they helped shape the genetic and cultural landscape of the entire world? What if their descendants are everywhere, carrying traces of their ancient heritage without even knowing it? The implications are staggering. It would mean that the story of the lost tribes isn't just ancient history. It's the story of humanity itself. It would explain why certain ideas, symbols, and practices seem to be universal. It would suggest that we're all connected in ways we never imagined. Tell me in the comments. Do you think it's possible that the lost tribes could have spread their influence so widely? Or do you think these are just interesting coincidences? Here's where things get really crazy, and I mean absolutely bonkers. Because the story of the lost tribes isn't just ancient history. It's happening right now in the 21st century, and it's changing everything we thought we knew about identity, genetics, and human migration. Let me start with something that sounds like science fiction but is absolutely real. In the last few decades, DNA technology has been reuniting the lost tribes in ways that would have been impossible just a generation ago. We're talking about genetic detective work that's solving mysteries that have been cold for 3,000 years. Remember the Lemba people I mentioned earlier? Well, genetic testing revealed that a significant portion of their male population carries the Cohen modal haplotype, a genetic signature found in Jewish priests. This isn't just any Jewish ancestry. This is the genetic signature of the priestly class. The Lemba men didn't just descend from Jews. They descended from the religious elite of ancient Israel. But it gets even more incredible. The Bnei Minashi people in India underwent genetic testing. And guess what? They showed clear genetic links to Middle Eastern populations. The Israeli government was so convinced by the evidence that they officially recognized them as descendants of the lost tribes and began organizing their immigration to Israel. This is happening all over the world. In Peru, there are communities that claim to be descendants of conversos, Jews who were forced to convert to Christianity during the Spanish Inquisition. Genetic testing has revealed that many of them do indeed carry Sephardic Jewish genetic markers. In Portugal and Spain, entire communities are discovering Jewish ancestry they never knew they had. But here's where it gets really mind-blowing. Some researchers believe that the genetic signatures of the lost tribes are far more widespread than anyone imagined. They're finding Middle Eastern genetic markers in populations that have no historical connection to Judaism. We're talking about people in Central Asia, Eastern Europe, and even parts of Africa who carry genetic signatures that suggest ancient Middle Eastern ancestry. This raises an incredible possibility. What if the lost tribes didn't just survive? What if they thrived? What if they spread out across the world, maintained their genetic identity, and are now being rediscovered through modern science? The Israeli government has been quietly investigating these claims for decades. They have researchers stationed around the world, collecting DNA samples, studying oral traditions, and trying to piece together the scattered fragments of the lost tribes. Some of their findings are public, but a lot of what they've discovered remains classified. Why the secrecy? Because the implications are staggering. If the lost tribes are as widespread as some researchers believe, it would mean that Jewish ancestry is far more common than anyone imagined. It would mean that the genetic and cultural influence of ancient Israel extends to every corner of the globe. There are online communities now where people share their genetic results and try to trace their ancestry back to the lost tribes. There are DNA testing companies that specifically market to people looking for Jewish ancestry. There are genealogy websites dedicated to reuniting the scattered children of Israel. But it's not just about genetics. Modern technology is also revealing cultural connections that were previously hidden. Linguists are using computer programs to analyze languages and find Hebrew roots in unexpected places. Archaeologists are using satellite imagery to discover ancient structures that might have been built by migrating Israelites. Social media has allowed isolated communities to connect with each other and share their traditions. A group in Afghanistan can now communicate with a community in India that has similar customs. People in South America can share stories with people in Africa who have parallel oral traditions. This is creating a global awakening. People who never knew they had Jewish ancestry are discovering genetic connections to ancient Israel. Communities that maintained Jewish-like customs for centuries are finally understanding their true origins. But here's the really wild part. Some researchers think we're just scratching the surface. They believe that as genetic testing becomes more sophisticated and more widespread, we're going to discover that the lost tribes are everywhere. That their descendants are our neighbors, our co-workers, maybe even ourselves. Imagine finding out that you carry genetic markers from the tribe of Naphtali. Or that your family's weird traditions that nobody could explain actually come from ancient Israelite practices. Or that the unusual words in your grandmother's dialect are actually corrupted Hebrew phrases that have been passed down for generations. This is already happening to people all over the world. They're getting DNA results that show Middle Eastern ancestry they never knew they had. They're researching their family histories and finding connections to Jewish communities that were supposed to have disappeared centuries ago. The lost tribes aren't lost anymore. They're being found. And as they're being found, they're changing our understanding of history, identity, and what it means to be human. The question is, are you ready to find out if you're one of them? Drop a comment below if you've ever wondered about your own ancestry, or if you think genetic testing might reveal surprising connections to ancient peoples. So there you have it. The greatest mystery in human history, and it's still being solved right now, in real time, all around us. The lost tribes of Israel didn't just disappear. They scattered across the globe, maintained their identity in secret, influenced countless cultures, and left genetic and cultural fingerprints that we're only now beginning to understand. From the mountains of Afghanistan to the jungles of South America, from the villages of India to the cities of Europe, the descendants of the lost tribes are everywhere. They're teachers and farmers, scientists and artists, your neighbors and maybe even you. Modern DNA technology is reuniting families that were separated 3,000 years ago. Ancient mysteries are being solved by cutting-edge science. And the story of the lost tribes is becoming the story of all humanity. But this is just the beginning. As more people get genetic testing, as more communities share their oral traditions, as more researchers dig into this mystery, we're going to discover even more incredible connections. The lost tribes are being found. The question is, what will we discover next? If this blew your mind as much as it blew mine, smash that like button and let me know in the comments what part of this story shocked you the most. Did you have any idea that the lost tribes might have traveled so far and influenced so many cultures? And hey, if you're curious about your own ancestry, I've put links in the description to some of the genetic testing companies that specialize in finding Jewish ancestry. Who knows? You might be carrying the genetic signature of ancient Israel without even knowing it. Subscribe and hit that notification bell because I'm going to be diving deep into more mysteries like this one. We're going to explore the hidden connections between ancient civilizations, the secret migrations that shaped our world, and the incredible stories that mainstream history doesn't want you to know. The lost tribes were just the beginning. There are so many more secrets waiting to be uncovered, and I can't wait to share them with you. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and remember, history is way more incredible than they taught you in school.